Well, this is a slightly different video from myself. It's an interview with a person I've admired, a scientist I've admired for years, which is Valentina Zharkova. But before we start the interview, I'd like to just point out a little bit of the background. It's just coming to the end of August in 2024 as I make this video, and we're having news of the oceans cooling. And in fact, the overall temperature, as you can see from the graph here, the oceans have really dropped off the cliff as regards cooling. And that is both the Atlantic and the Pacific. And it's baffled scientists, they say. The newspaper headlines, it's baffled us. We've got to rethink things, maybe, and so on. Well, actually, it isn't that baffling. I've been going on about the North Atlantic decadal oscillation and the Pacific one for years. I've featured them on television with my spars with people like Jim Dale of trying to show the graph, etc. And so there are cycles, and cycles was really what all this program is going to be about. So just look at these graphs, understand that today we're seeing cooling. We're seeing cooling of the oceans. And a point I'd like to make is I did a video on last year's record, 2023 world record, hottest ever temperatures, which is totally absurd. When you looked at the data, which I did, the land areas were cooling. All the main land areas were cooling, but the oceans had warmed. It was the oceans that caused that. Now, the oceans are about 70% of the world, and actually 73% if you include all the Great Lakes and things. So that's what absorbs the heat. The heat coming in shortwave radiation is that is really the heat sink of the Earth, and the oceans control the temperatures, not the other way around. That is important to understand before we begin this. Now, I want to simplify what Valentina has to say. She has as a scientist, she'll speak fairly fast about things. So my job is to try to put brakes on and try to explain what she's saying. She's an absolutely brilliant scientist. And she's also suffered from being that. She's a truth teller. And I think what drives her today, and it comes through at the very end of this interview, what drives her today is that she knows she's right, so she has to keep going. And with that, I share her feelings. So without further ado, let's do the interview with Valentina. Well, welcome to this video. Today we have Valentina Zharkova, who I've long admired from a distance and actually featured her in a number of videos. And she graciously agreed to have a Zoom meeting with me. So, and in this Zoom meeting, well, I want to explain some background first. Valentina has had to struggle with getting simple truths through to the scientists. And one of the reasons I didn't become an academic and went into a practical side of it was because of the pettiness that I found in academia. But Valentina's particularly suffered from this. And the subject I'd like to start with is, and by the way, I'm wearing sunglasses because I have an eye problem and I'm having surgery soon. And I've got a piece of tape here to hold my eyelid down. So it's rather distracting. So I'm wearing sunglasses. But Valentina did struggle. She actually is basically a mathematician who does astrophysics and so on. And that really feeds in to climate, of course, because, that is it. With the sun, the stars and the planets are all part of what controls the atmosphere. So hello, Valentina, and thank you for coming.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be on your podcast.
Thank you. So can you tell me, was it when you did, can you explain what the problem was in simple terms you had getting people to accept that besides the well-known Milankovitch cycles, besides the major ones, the 100,000 years, the 40, roughly 140,000, 18 or whatever it was, 20, besides those big cycles, that the Earth does actually change its distance from the sun. And the basic reason is, I know it sounds strange, but the sun doesn't actually revolve around, the Earth does not revolve around the sun. It actually rolls around the barycenter.
Exactly.
Yeah? So if you could explain that, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, if you can see the screen, I'll show the screen now. I'll run with this. What we discovered was paper in Nature, Scientific Reports, 2019. What we discovered that the sun has grand cycle, 330, 380 years, shown by these vertical lines. And within these grand cycles, you can see that the patterns of grand cycles repeat every approximately 2,000 years. They become identical if you compare first, second. And this puzzled us. So we started investigating our curve. We calculated our curve for solar activity for 120,000 years. And what we discovered, that magnetic field described by this curve has a fluctuation of the zero line. So zero line basically has to be zero. So positive polarity or northern polarity top and south and down and change polarities. But what we discovered, it fluctuates, baseline fluctuates, and it fluctuates with very strict period, 2,100 years, which was exactly puzzle which came define this similarity of 2,000 approximately years. Then I look at the data, and all the data of solar radiation in the Holocene in 12,000 years before show this 2,000-year cycle. It's called Halstead cycle. They simply did not relate it to the distance. I don't know why nobody thought about it.
So just to recap there, the approximately 2,000 year cycle was known about. It had been discovered before, but no one related it to the distance from the sun. And that was Valentina's work.
But this is what we discovered at that time. And we look that at this period, we are here on the ascending side of this cycle. So the minimum was Mount the minimum, and now the baseline moves closer to the southern polarity, and then moves up, increasing. And this is where we are. So this is why this what we discovered, this probably is because the sun become closer to the earth. This is the only reason we could find why this zero line changes, and changes so nicely periodically. So we looked at the variations of the solar radiance, and so we discovered that the solar radiance has to change because of, on top of Milankovitch cycles, there are also another cycles appearing on the Earth and the Sun. So when Kepler invented Kepler laws, at that time, Newton did not report yet his report about gravity. It took another 20 years before it appeared. So Kepler did not know gravity. He knew only the planets rotate around the sun because sun attracts them. But then Kepler reported the gravity. It took about 300 years until Joshi, 1965, this usual Milankovitch cycle, which I omit because the shortest cycle is 15,000 years, the longest 100,000, which are not applicable to us because we're speaking about 2,000 years. But we were speaking about solar inertial motion, the feedback which planets give to the sun. So not only sun attracts gravitation, by gravitation the planets, the planets also attract the sun. And
could I just hold you there for a second?
Yes.
This is really important. If you had two stars and they're equal size, they'd revolve around the center between them.
Yeah.
Yes. But if you had one bigger star than the other, that center would move towards the bigger star.
Exactly.
So what you're saying is that the planets, and there's some big planets going around the sun, pull on the sun as well as the sun pulling on the planets, and we don't actually orbit the sun. We orbit a center that's not the sun.
We orbit the center of mass of the whole solar system, and the sun orbits the center of mass also on smaller orbits, like here. So this been calculated. Solar orbit simulator is available on the website. Everyone can calculate for each particular day and year where the sun is located in this solar inertial motion. And the diameter of the circle in which sun moves around the barycenter is about 2 solar radius. So 4 solar radius. So 2 solar radius is radius of this motion. So what has happened, we discovered when we look at the ephemeris, official NASA ephemeris of the distant sun and Earth, what we discovered that the sun doesn't sit in the center or in the focus of the ellipse, but becomes moving closer to the Earth orbit or further from it. So it, at the moment in this millennium, 1600 to 2600, the sun moves closer to the Earth during the spring equinox. So it is much closer to the Earth during from February until probably July. And this is what even August. And this is why we have much warmer temperature in the northern hemisphere than the southern. I've shown this about 0.2% more radiation the northern hemisphere obtains during this time.
Sorry, how much did you say more radiation?
Northern hemisphere, we calculated in paper 2023, northern hemisphere gets 0.2% higher radiation than southern hemisphere. From March till September, from spring equinox to the autumn equinox, the amount of radiation deposited by sun 0.2% higher than the amount of radiation deposited between autumn equinox to the next spring equinox to the southern. So this is why the northern hemisphere is warmed more than southern during these last 300 years. I'm not speaking about next 10 years when the temperature started decreasing, but it is related to decrease of solar activity. So it doesn't matter what happens if the sun stops firing the flares, active regions, and CMEs. It will not be heating. It will be like boiler standing in your house, but not switched on.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It is close to us. It will be still in the same distance.
Right.
The period of rotation 2,000 years, and this period when it moves towards the Earth is 1,000 years. So we came through 300 years or 350, another 500, 600 years still will be moving towards. So we are in the same position, but because the warming previous few years, but when the sun gets into the minimum solar activity, which it's getting now, we will not have this heating. The temperature start decreasing. And this is what we observe in northern and southern hemisphere. It was snow, huge frost last winter in North America, Canada. It is cold this winter in Australia, actually, this winter right now. They had the coldest July on record.
Can I just ask you that there? So what we're talking about here, and I'm summarizing it for my viewers, what we're talking about is what you've done is actually calculate the more exact distances of the Earth from the sun, hence the change in radiation to the Earth. And this obviously goes in a pattern, as it were, and that's what you're completely explaining there. But
what I did not calculate the distances, luckily, because they would object that I done it incorrectly or something. I use NASA official ephemeris.
So in order to explain that term to viewers, this is from the NASA website, Orbits and Ephemerids. In the context of this website, orbits refer to the orbital elements, while ephemerids refer to data that represent the trajectory of an object over time. As part of our charter, we provide orbits and ephemerids for all known natural objects in the solar system, and that is what Valentina used, the official NASA data.
Also, the similar ephemeris are confirmed by Paris Madon observatories. So either of those, everyone can use, and these are the plot distances which I discovered. On the top it is year, 600, 1100, 1600, and in this bit is 1700, 2020, 2600. So these are the distances which I took from ephemeris, and you can see the distances are decreasing. And the closer we come to 2600, the closer become the sun towards the Earth in March April, May. This is why we have hottest weather in northern hemisphere. So you see the distances decreasing very dramatically.
And this is from the Met Office, which reinforces the point. Although I will make the point that these are weather events and we need a pattern to establish anything. But to back up the point made by Valentina, this is from the Met Office this summer, July 24. Cool weather for many. Although a few places reached the heatwave conditions back at the end of June, summer 2024 so far has been cooler than average at the time of writing. The mean temperature in the UK stands at 13.04 C, which is 1.55 C cooler than the long-term meteorological average for summer season. They typed in reason by mistake there. Never mind. July 2024 has continued June's theme of cooler than average weather, with temperatures persistently below average across the UK for the first part of the month. So I think what she's saying is the mathematics that she's producing basically reinforce our good weather being earlier in the year, and then I'm afraid not so good for the rest of the year. But again, these are weather events and they have to be taken as just little signs, but nothing that's definite without seeing a pattern in them.
So you can see it decreases by 0.100 of astronomical unit, which when we reported this in the paper 219, they arranged the campaign for few months, just bullying us and made the editor to retract our paper, saying that the sun and Earth distance doesn't change. Which
hold on here. Can I just stop you there? So what the people are saying to you is, sorry, that's wrong. The mathematics are wrong, even though you use NASA data. Yes.
No, I didn't use NASA data when we published the paper. I didn't realize it is the issue.
Right. All right.
At that time.
Okay.
At that time, I thought it was my good guess when we discovered that the distance between Earth and Sun changes, and I thought it is if we calculate this for solar radius diameter, and say one time it is on one side of this circle and another, so difference we calculated would be about 0.35% or 3.5% of solar radiance. And this is when anthropogenic global warming people become very agitated, because it says that they underestimated the solar forcing for their models, because they assume the solar forcing is constant. And I'm saying, no, it is not constant.
So again, to summarize for the viewers, what they're saying is the distance to the sun is constant. They know about Milankovitch, but on these terms of this length of time, it's constant. And they didn't know about this. But if they didn't know about this and they challenged you, my question to you is, why didn't they check the mathematics?
This picture on the bottom on here, this is produced by Professor Ken Rice from Edinburgh University, saying that yellow, this is motion of the sun, yellow circle. And blue, this is motion of the Earth. What he was saying, the Earth is not moving in this ellipse around barycenter, but following the sun.
So what Valentina had exposed was that the climate models, do not allow for this at all. They assume the Earth keeps the same distance from the sun, apart from the Milankovitch cycles, of course, which are very long term. And it doesn't. And it hasn't been allowed for. But to even be more absurd, the diagram here shows that the Earth wobbles in the same way, if you like, goes on a little orbit of its own to mirror the sun. And of course, this is absurd, for as we know, you detect planets on distant stars by how the star moves because of the pull of the planets. And in fact, everything, including the sun, orbits around the centre of mass of the whole solar system. And so it's quite remarkable here, because I just find this amazing. But it shows you how fundamentally flawed, just on this aspect, the climate models are.
I said it is nonsense. It cannot happen. All planets move about. So when I published the chapter in which I presented the NASA ephemeris, I sent this chapter and a letter to the Vice Chancellor of Edinburgh University and asked if your Professor Rice is the professor of celestial mechanics, he ought to know that the planets move around the barycenter and not jumping, Earth jumping after the Earth. So either he very poor professor of celestial mechanics, or he deliberately misled all the humankind, putting these wrong images. And
I find that amazing. I just find that absolutely, and I want to emphasize this for the viewers. So what we got is Professor of Celestial Mechanics, as it were, and this is actually mathematics in the end, isn't it?
yes, it's
I
celestial
mean, this is
mechanics,
mathematics.
it's
This is
mathematics.
the beautiful science of mathematics, because the purity of mathematics is rather nice, really. And so he couldn't accept it, but all he had to do was check your work and find the errors.
Yeah,
That's all
just
he had to do.
check official ephemeris. When they retracted paper, it was 4th March 2020. I put all objections. I put evidences that astrophysicists use these wobbling stars to find the stars with the planetary system, because when the star is wobbling, it obviously has gravitational feedback from the planets.
Yes.
So astrophysicists knew, but solar physicists or planetary physicists did not know. So they retracted paper on the 4th of March 2020. On the 20th of March, they put us on the lockdown for COVID. And so I could sit at home and, weep and lick my wounds. Or I decided, okay, if they said this is wrong and they have me official reason retraction that this distance between Sun and Earth doesn't change, let me check this distance. So I spent 3 months downloading the data and building the plots, and eventually I discovered I was absolutely right. I guessed absolutely correctly based on the general logics, how the magnetic field can change because the sun becomes either closer or further from you.
Fine. Well, but this is well known. I think even lay people understand some of this. Lay people understand that how we find stars.
To the protagonist of anthropogenic global warming.
But lay people understand that we find where the planets around stars by the movement, the wobble of the star. Two bodies equal, it wobbles around the eccentre. One body bigger, it moves that point of But this is basic. And
this is absolutely basic, and they refuse to do the homework. And for them, in that chapter, I even calculated differences between distances in beginning of century 1600 and the current century. So you see the difference is about 0.5 thousandths of astronomical unit to 0.1 hundredths of astronomical unit, exactly as we anticipated in simple estimate, because they retracted the paper for a single paragraph in which we said that the solar irradiance should change with the distance from the sun to Earth. And
it must do. It must change.
Oh, you read the paper, you will see they said this distance does not change. This is what the main retraction reason.
I just find this remarkable. I battle in my world. My viewers know that I battle with all sorts of things, and I always try to use official data. I often use the alarmist data to battle. And no matter how sometimes you battle, and in terms of technology, because I branch into engineering, in terms of the technology, I'm battling on the simplest things. And so, sorry, I'll just.
So this is what, in that chapter in our presentation, I cross over this plot sent by Ken Rice and other protagonists. The sun Earth distance doesn't change because they are simply wrong. And what I discovered from this ephemera, that aphelion will be, at the moment, aphelion is not on the 21st of June, the shortest distance, but actually it is on the 5th July was in this year, 5th of July, and it will be 16th of July and perihelion 16 January 2600. This is why the shortest distance changes become shorter, because it is not the main axis of the ellipse. It is the shorter axis. You see that?
Yes,
Because the
so it's
sun
the
moves.
equinox. So in terms of layman again, it's the
Yes.
equinox is changing, but they
Yes.
haven't allowed for it.
Yes, exactly. This is why we have hotter summers, because the sun become closer to our planet in aphelium. So this is why northern hemisphere is much hotter than southern, because our aphelion distance is much shorter than it should be for ellipse when the sun sitting in its focus.
Well, that's bad news. That's bad news. What you're telling me is this is a reason we're having shorter summers.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
puzzles a lot of people for all the global warming here in the UK. I mean, really, I'm still waiting for our summer. We had a little bit of good warmth in May. No, we had that last year, but that's it. And we're being told it's the hottest year ever. And of course, the alarmists work on CO2 causing everything, and that would be global then, wouldn't it? But it's not, because there's a difference between the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere on
Yeah,
this.
but the sun is now also on top of that, on top of orbital motion.
Yes.
Sun entered into the ground solar minimum. Let
Right.
me show you what
So now
where
we're
we are
talking not
now.
about, sorry, we're talking now not about the distances, we're talking about the activity of the sun itself.
Exactly. So the radiation we obtain is two components. One, it is where the sun is located physically on the orbit.
Yeah.
And the other, how much radiation it produces.
Yes.
And at the moment, it produces less radiation because it enters into ground solar minimum. Let me show you how it looks like.
Right.
I'm here. Yeah. So if you show this one, so we are now on the cycle 25, and then we go into cycle 26, which will be much lower.
Yeah.
So basically, what let me come over here. What we discovered that the sun entered the normal ground solar minimum, like here.
Yes.
So what you see, we are, let me check, probably better, the one which we presented in the Nature paper. So these are the data with the ellipse showing how many cycles we used.
Yes.
We used 3 cycles. And
each one of those a cycle, then what you've just circled there at the ellipse, that's what
this we
each
use
cycle.
data from 1976 to 2010.
Right.
This 3 solar cycles. Now we extended it to cycle 24. We published paper 2022 monthly notice. But at that time, we used only 3 cycles. We derived the formula. And what we discovered that actually we are on the verge to come into ground solar minimum, which is defined by the interference of 2 waves. So basically what we discovered that the sun has not 1, but 2 waves propagating. So we run principal component analysis and discovered 2 eigenvectors, not 1, but 2. So they
have to stop you. Sorry, I have to stop you just for a second for the public.
Yes.
What we're talking about is when you have a wave going one way and you have a wave going the other way, they can partially or totally cancel each other out. So waves, we're talking about which side of the zero line, in effect, the wave is. So we're talking about waves cancelling each other out. And you've found 2 waves there, and to some extent, one is mitigating the other one. Correct?
Yes, I will show you. I have for my students, this is the slide I show in my lecture notes for 2-wave interference. So if you have one way, 2 black curves on the top representing 2 waves, which have a little phase difference.
Yes.
So when in antiphase, the resulting wave, blue wave, has 0 intensity. When they are in the same phase, the resulting wave have double amplitude of this. So this is basically what we got from 2 waves. So these 2 waves run slightly out of phase, and this is the theory. Basically, you add in cosine functions of 2 and obtain these oscillations, and we obtain ground solar cycle. So nothing.
Why are the 2 waves? Why are the 2 waves in the sun? Why do you have 2?
Why? Because the sun has 2 layers. Here there were observations with dynamic solar observatory.
Yes.
from helioseismic observations, they discovered the sun has two layers. One is inner layer marked by red, and one is outer layer in each hemisphere marked by blue.
Right.
And the difference in the phase comes from the speed of meridional circulation. This was covered by these red and blue circles. So if the meridional circulation difference only 1 meter per second, we obtain exactly the period. Only 1 meter per second difference of meridian circulation in the blue and red layers.
That was a paper from
Gives us this
2013.
350 period. Huh?
Yeah, I see. Right, good. So you've got an inner core,
this is
and you've got an inner and outer, slightly different, giving you the two waves.
Yeah.
And they can cancel each other out.
Exactly. And this is why they produce this kind of beating effect. So the amplitude increase in the middle of the cycle, but when it closes to the end, you see this ground solar minima when the amplitude is approaching nearly to zero. It is not exactly zero, but nearly to zero. So you can see that the first ground solar minimum comes 2020, 2053, and the next ground solar minimum comes 2375, 2400.
When was that first one? That's more important.
Which started right now, 2020, and it will last until 2053.
Right, so we're entering.
This is the one which we.
Sorry, what you're telling everyone is we're going to be in for colder weather then?
Yes, exactly.
I mean, this is really important to people. So the long-term weather forecast as regards climate, time, weather over time. And that doesn't mean to say we can't have little hot things or fluctuations, but what it means is the overall climate now is cooling. Yes?
Exactly. So the two component of the sun sends radiation, whatever it produces itself on the solar surface, and it travels to Earth and other planet. Yeah. But also sun moves itself towards us or from us.
Yes.
And this adds or subtracts the radiation. So at the moment, sun is close to us, but it's getting into hibernation, into this ground solar minimum because of the wave interference. And this is what we are looking at the bottom plot.
So you're combining the distances now together with the solar activity. You're bringing the two together now to see the net effect.
Yes.
Correct. I'm interrupting
this
just to make it
doesn't matter now, because when the sun stops firing the energy, even the sun is close to us, we will have cold here. Because if you have your boiler standing even in your lunchroom, but it is not switched on, you will not have any heating. So this is what will be happening.
Right. So even though it gets closer, it's going to get cooler. Yeah. Oh dear.
Yeah, it's going to get cooler and this is why anthropogenic global warming people are very scared, because when it will become cooler, they say we have CO2 and heat in atmosphere, but it will become cooler. It will mean that we are not heating the atmosphere. It is the sun which is heating. And when the sun stops heating, we have cooling. So this is evidence that they are not correct.
Sorry, the recent news on this, of course, and this is happening now this year, is the oceans, the Pacific and the Atlantic, are really cooling. And when I'll edit in now. I'll edit in a little section to show people that, because I'm not good at screen sharing. So I'll edit in a little section to show people how the Pacific and Atlantic are cooling. And the alarmists say we can't explain it. We've got to dig deeper is the frame they use. They can't explain it. But last year, when we had the hottest year on record, and I did a video on that, it was the oceans causing it. It was the oceans causing the warming. And now it's the ocean causing the cooling. And of course, the oceans, water is 73% of the atmosphere, and the oceans are about 70%, but that includes the lakes, the water.
Yes.
And the radiation, the shortwave radiation, is what heats the oceans. And if you're going to have a bath, you don't warm. If you had a hot bath and just left it for hours, it would warm the bathroom. But if you just warm the air and wait for the cold water to warm, you'd be an awful long time before you had a warm bath. Yes,
exactly.
And so And I try to put it into simple terms for people. And so, if CO2, if the atmosphere was warming the oceans, no. The other day, I was working outside in the garden. I put my elbow on a galvanized drain, and I had to move it. It was hot, even though it wasn't particularly hot weather. That was absorbing, or the bonnet of your car can absorb energy.
Uh-huh.
When the air around it is not as hot as the bonnet of your car, and that's the shortwave radiation heating that, but not heating the air. And this fundamental thing really has to be understood. And I did a video a couple of years ago, and based on your work, I did two videos. One included a reference to you, but actually was merging your work with someone else's work. They both
Mm-hmm.
coincided. They both coincided, which is quite exciting for me. And so, and the other one was It's Getting Colder, which was primarily your work. So it's bad news for people because we're doing away
Yeah,
with
it's getting
fossil
colder
fuel.
and very seriously colder. And
Yes,
why it is colder, it's been said, it was a paper, Schindler et al. 201. They explained why the temperature decreased by 1 degree in Mount the minimum on the whole planet. And
yes,
you look at this paper and you look at these plots, they explain that what is happening, like in here, it's
yes,
happening that the northern stable jet stream
yes,
without cooling, without ground solar minimum when
yes,
radiation is normal, is steady and straight line. But when less radiation coming, we have less ozone affected by planetary atmosphere and kick on the North Atlantic oscillation. And what we see, this jet excursions of the cold air from the north moving to the south. This is what we see now, and we'll see even more in the next few decades.
So how
Moreover, Royal
will it be as cold as the Little Ice Age? Will it get as cold, or will it maybe just be like the Dalton minimum, which was a bit less cold?
No, it will be getting cold, indeed, by 1 degree. What I suspect, it will be snowing in May, at least in cycle 26, between, let us pass the maximum of cycle 25, where are we now?
Yeah,
When it start descending from 2026 onwards, this will be strong decrease of solar radiation coming to the Earth. And here is Royal Observatory of Belgium shows in the green line the increased number spotless day in cycle 25 compared to all 25 or 30 cycles already measured by us. And you
yes,
see that we indeed in ground solar minimum, like Maunder, because the number spotless day much higher than it was cycle 10, 20, 10, 15 when it was Dalton minimum marked by blue. So definitely it is a type of Maunder, although it would last shorter on the 3 solar cycles, not 6 like it was then. So
so
this is what
sorry, hurry on.
And this
How
is
long?
what cooling started already, and evidence of this cooling, we had snow in Carpathian Mountains in July 2019 in Ukraine. We had snow in Africa desert 8 December 2020, and temperature -2, which they never had before. We
Yeah,
have US and Canada cold blizzard 22, 23. In
yes,
Australia in November, which is our end of our May, they had snow in Australia. So these are all evidences which prove that we are already entered ground solar minimum. And this is what is waiting for us. We need to see, this is the main important thing which is required for people, that basically we need to think about food. We need to think about heating for people with any possible resources, because it will not work. Anything will work. And vegetation period, you need to grow food. If it will be snowing from May until May and started snowing again September, when the wheat and vegetables will grow up for us. So we
yes.
need to think about it.
Yes, we do. I mean, I mean, and what we're doing at the moment, I look at the engineering side, and what we're doing at the moment is doing away. We're stopping fossil fuel exploration in Britain. We're stopping oil and gas, whilst at the same time claiming we must be independent on energy, which is ridiculous. Yeah, and so we're doing
Yeah,
the
but
opposite of what's needed by people who don't
exactly.
understand basic science. But so. I find this fascinating. I find it fascinating that you have had to argue the way you've had to argue in your history of your career, and how, leading astrophysicists, if you like, can't understand some simplicity. Because what that chap from Edinburgh was claiming was, as the sun did that, so did the Earth do it, which was a bit silly. And really basic stuff here. So to some extent, you represent the entire, how can I put it, the cancellation culture of truth. But science, you shouldn't be scared about being wrong in science. You shouldn't be. You should be
Well,
scared. You should be scared about, and I've been wrong. I've been wrong in things I've done. I've been wrong in the way the jet stream behaved, I think, in what I showed. I'm quite happy to admit it. I don't mind being wrong in science, because I'd rather be put out of my ignorance. That's the attitude. But I don't try to identify myself personally with the science. The science is independent of me as a person and you. But yeah, I mean, the beauty about what you've done is you've got exact explanations for what's happening, and now they're in a quandary because all these signs are going to show up quite quickly, and they're going to have to make excuses. But let me tell you something now. They will say this extreme of cold is caused by global warming. They will.
yeah.
But they will.
Well, uh, yeah, they will try, but when the number of sunspots will be very low, even Noah had to admit that it was reduction of number of sunspots in the last cycles. Remember, I'll show you the
Yeah.
number of sunspots keep decreasing and decreasing with every
Michael.
cycle.
Yeah.
So they cannot deny it. The sun is preparing for hibernation, and this is what is happening. So
Yes.
this cannot be denied. But my main topic was particle acceleration. This is why I shown you my web page. I wrote a book, and now writing the second one, electron and proton kinetic dynamics in flaring atmosphere, solar flares. Run the book about artificial intelligence, pattern recognition. Also, number of chapters in the books, advancing theory, particle acceleration. And I discovered sunquakes. If people old enough to remember May 27th of May 1998, it was on all news on 5 continents, discovery of sunquakes on the sun. It was our work. So basically my topic was from different plasma physics. I started doing only solar activity from 2005 onwards, when we got the big
So,
databases, and I
so,
decided to make an order.
so you came up with the work that discovered the solar quakes,
Yeah, I am the one, and Sasha Kosovichev from Stanford. These
which is
two of
accepted.
us.
That's accepted. But you've also done some recent work on La Nina and El Nino. Well, La Ninas and El Ninos. You've done some work on that with
Dania, Alena Dania. And I done some work with my son, Sergei Zharkov. He is now my main heliosseismology guy, and we're writing a book with him. So
oh, good.
hopefully the book
Well,
he is the one who discovered sunquake, second bounce of sunquake. It's really unique. You needed very quiet atmosphere, but he managed to detect it. He's a very talented scientist as well.
who was that again, please? Who?
Sergei Zharkov, it's my son.
Ah, right. So,
He works lecturer at Hull University.
do you get, because of your views, are you getting any opposition now? Are you getting any?
Oh yes, I got. It took me, when my paper was retracted, the university put the disciplinary hearing about how do I write the paper which is retracted. I said, "Excuse me." The pro vice chancellor was interrogating me. How did I dare to write? I said, "If you are so smart in solar physics, next paper I write in solar physics, I give you for review for next time." But by that time, I found the ephemeris and published the chapter, so I could reply to him, excuse me, I can't be responsible for incompetence or not truthful approach, because I don't believe Ken Rice can be so irresponsible. He knew that the distance changes, but he's still hiding it from people just to get funding. Similar like Vice Chancellor, whom I wrote about his deficiency, he said, oh, he has a right to make errors. I said, excuse me, he is
Yeah.
the
Well, hold on.
nominated professor. It is
But
not error. It is
no.
cheating. It is a
Yeah.
cheating.
Yeah. I mean, did anything happen to him with his
No,
resistance?
no, they said he has right to make, because
Right to
they
make
got
error.
all the
But with
funding
you,
from
so he had a right to make
European.
he had a right to make error, but in your case, you get a disciplinary hearing.
Yes,
Right.
yes, and
Wow.
it went nowhere. Luckily, the vice chancellor of my university and the HR stood by me, so they just calmed them down. But uh, I really appreciate them very much. But the fact was, it was the fact. They
Yeah.
tried to scare me, and
Yeah. I
so
had
this was.
I appear on GB News, which is a national news channel, quite a lot. And I was in the green room recently with the next Labour minister who told me in the green room, he said, you know, you better be careful here. I've been I'm a vice chancellor of a university, and your views, you've only got one scientist in the world can believe in your views, and so on, trying to use his position as
Oh,
vice
exactly.
chancellor.
This is how they treat you.
I know, and but no one debates. I can't get. We've just had recent tries. There's a video just been published, and by a person who tried to get a debate between myself and with another scientist on my side and the opposition. But what they said was, they'd need 16 scientists on their side to two on our side. So we said back, well, let's go 50% of the time. You can have 16 people, but we need 50% of the time. And they said, oh, no, no, you can only have a small fraction of the time. So it's a total misunderstanding of what science is. I mean, really a
Yeah,
big
exactly.
misunderstanding.
The science is not the mass voting. The
Correct,
science all is done by unique people who
correct.
forward this. And 1 million of flies will never persuade me that the shit that they like is very delicious.
That's right. And as Einstein said when he had the 100 scientists oppose him on the theory of relativity, he said, why do you need 100? You only need one to prove me wrong. One to prove me wrong.
Absolutely.
And actually, if you
And they
look at
cannot prove these are official ephemeris of NASA. So now I'm proving them wrong. Not
this,
they cannot prove me wrong because
no,
NASA would publish this officially.
right. Well, I mean, so to summarize, we'll try to summarize this now. I've kept you long enough, but you've got some bad news for the people of. We're talking about UK at the moment, but I'm afraid it applies to the world. It's going to get colder, and it's going to get
Yes,
seriously colder. But with
yes,
that coldness comes a
exactly.
shorter growing season, and so on. And that shorter growing season is worldwide, is it? Yes,
Yes.
it's worldwide. So at the moment, because
Well,
we
maybe not about subtropical regions in Africa. So this
yeah.
is why Chinese people buying lands in Africa, they know it will be golden land.
I see. So because all the climate changes tend to come from the poles inwards, don't they? So we're
Yeah,
going to get
exactly.
colder. But I mean, we've had world record crops as we've warmed since the Little Ice Age. And
Yeah.
I don't know what they want us to go back to. One of my puzzles for the alarmists is what level of climate do they want us to go back to? Because in my area of hydrology and so on, the very worst drought, I think, was 1776. And the next
Mhm.
worst one was just after that, and the early 1800s. So in cold weather, we have far worse droughts, and we had more extremes weather in the past, far more extreme. And you can see that from that graph you showed of the what do you call it, So yeah, I mean, I found your work really exciting, and we must do another one maybe on another topic because in
Okay.
particular, I'd wanted to look at what the work you've done, showing some links with planets orbiting, and possible seismic activity and so on.
Yes.
So we need to look at that, but they need to be a separate subject because my viewers can only take so much at one time. And I will be putting
Okay.
in some graphs into this. I'll edit this down, and I will put some graphs into this to from the recent stuff about ocean warming to explain. But well, what you are, Valentina, is a true scientist, and you've had to battle your way on that. You know, you've had to
Yeah, I
battle.
don't know
No,
why
you
I'm
are.
doing this, but I can't believe it now because if I know the truth, I cannot hide it. I need to deliver it to people and they decide. They need to prepare their houses, put the stoves instead of gas fire because the gas fire might not be working.
That's
Put
right.
the
I've got.
stove, put something heating. Think how you cook. If you have on the electricity will not be working. Electricity only will be working for the houses closest to the electric station if they will be at home during snow. All
Yeah,
other for the houses, there will not be enough electricity because it's designed that people are at work during the day. If they start consuming energy, we will not have electricity
that's
for the
right.
houses. So you need to think how to heat house, how to heat family, and how to survive.
Yeah, that's right. And I bought a generator as a backup with red diesel, but I still need the red diesel. Yeah, because you can use cheap.
Yeah, at least you have.
Running the generator, I don't do it except as a backup, but running the generator is actually around about a third of the price, the cost of buying the electricity on the grid. Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's cheaper.
I'm going to buy generator. I made a quotation because my cooker is electric. I wouldn't be
Like
able
mine.
to cook.
Same here.
I have gas heater and I could put stove. I need to buy a portable stove just in
Yes,
case. So
yes,
these are things you need to think through.
yes. I
And we
think
have only 5 years before it arrives, or 3 years before it arrives.
right, but you're going to see the result of your work. You're going to see the result coming quite quick because we've started it. It has started. The
Yes.
signs are there now. It has started, and the indicators are there. I mean, you can get fluctuations, but the pattern now is down. That's
Yes.
bad news. You're a bringer of bad news, and I'm going to
Well,
thank you so
you're
much
welcome.
for spending the time. And
You're welcome.
this will be out in a week or two. I always edit it down and so on. Nothing will be missed out. But I'll maybe adding a few little bits to it to show in particular the recent graphs because I'm not used to all this. You are used to screen sharing. I'm not. So
Mhm.
once again, thank
If
you
you
very.
need more material, send me. I will send you the separate plots if you
That'd
need
be
them.
nice. Yeah, that'd be
Just in
nice
case.
because I can show it maybe easier on the screen. And
Okay.
sometimes I'll slow down the explanation to show the graphics so I can use, and so on. And you did that brilliant graphic of the sound waves cancelling each other out and so on. So there we are. And my work, by the way, my work in the early days was my job was to try to predict long-term climate changes for reservoir systems. So what is a 1 in 1,000 year flood? What is a 1 in 1,000 year drought? And what I did was my early work was I took river flows. Now the river flows I took were without any springs, so it was pure a dampened reflection of rain. Yes, and I
Hmm.
found next to the seasonal cycle, and this was I wasn't looking for it, and next to the seasonal cycle, the biggest cycle was the solar cycle, the 11-year solar.
Hmm.
I know it's a
Yeah.
22-year, but I found the 11 year. And that, wow, that was in 1971, but I was running an 8K mainframe with 50 staff.
Yeah.
And I remember the day the county council upgraded it to a 16K mainframe. And it was used only for accounting, but they let me use it for scientific work. And that was my early days of this sort of work. And of course, I was looking at cycles. And so very much the same as you're doing in a much grander, much more complicated, much more advanced way than I could dream of. And so there is a similarity there, although mine was extremely crude.
Well,
Okay.
I have a theory that every grand solar minimum comes through the change of the theories. Maunder came from heliocentric system to heliocentric Kepler and Copernicus system, and here we come from global warming to solar and orbital motion
I
handling
see.
the atmosphere. So this is my humorous representation. So
Yes, it'd
I
have to
think
be.
they're defending their Ron's theory is like Inquisition defended geocentric system. This is the only reason I can explain, because no scientific reason. It is error after error.
Humans. Okay, well, thank you
Yeah.
very much. We'll close it
You're
now.
welcome.
I really do appreciate it.
Thank you
Okay.
very much for inviting me. Have a
I
good
don't
day.
know.
Cheers.
No, thank you. I'm going to
Bye
end
bye.
it. Right, I'll have ended it already.